January 6th, 2021 was a dark day in the history of our country. What follows are the actual words of those who witnessed the insurrection. Police officers, elected officials, congressional employees, journalists, White House officials, as well as the insurrectionists and Donald Trump himself. The readers are Mary Shalon, John Harnagle, Heather Taylor, and Lance Davis. Here now, January 6th, in their own words.
It's statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. We will never give in. We will never give up, and we will never back down. We will never, ever surrender. Big protest in DC on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild.
Millions of Americans will consider him illegitimate. We are going to kill it in the crib. Kill the Biden presidency in the crib. People are going to go, what the fuck is going on here? We're going to bury Biden on January 6th. Fucking bury him. Steve Bannon.
Tomorrow, Trump and we the people will be betrayed again by every so-called representative who said they'd fight for us. Our president wants us in DC. We are representing the 74 million people who got disenfranchised. We are still out there. We are a force to be reckoned with. We are not going away. We wait and we take orders from our president. Proud Boy, January 5th.
1 million pissed off men with guns. Bad idea. Samuel Fisher, dating coach.
I was nervous about that day already. I was concerned something might happen based on the information I had. Senator Rob Portman, Republican from Ohio.
I'm thinking it will be literal war on that day. We'll storm offices and physically remove and even kill all the DC traitors and reclaim the country. Trump supporter.
I know that a friend very early in the morning texted me like, stay safe today, or something. I literally texted back, I don't think I'm going to be fighting Proud Boys on my commute. Thanks. Catherine Tully McManus, reporter.
Patriots who can get to DC need to be in DC. Now is the time to stand. It's not too late to go. Jump on a plane, jump in your car, just get there. Show the president you support him taking decisive action as both president and commander-in-chief. And show Congress that we, the people, will not stand for the election being stolen to plant an imposter Chi-Com puppet in the White House. Stand now or kneel forever. Trump supporter.
I'm working with several of the teams that have been putting together evidence, statistical, sworn affidavits, with legal teams from around the country to try and get members of Congress to object to the various certification slates as the various states come up. John Eastman, attorney for Donald J. Trump.
What I do specifically remember is parking on Delaware Avenue and getting out and seeing a handful of Trump folks with flags and signs, but not looking particularly menacing, and saying, oh, there's going to be a big protest today, right? Yes. And saying, I'm sure the Capitol Police have got this. Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware.
I came in around lunchtime, and I remember my direct quote. I work in the safest building in DC next to the Pentagon. Jay Rupert, White House employee.
There was just a standard briefing. This is what we got coming. This is what we expect. But we kind of knew it wasn't going to be a regular day just from the sheer number of people. Also, the day before, there have been arrests of guys with guns from like the Proud Boys, Metropolitan Police Officer.
If you live in this neighborhood, this happens a lot. We had gone through the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and so you kind of know when people are going to kind of show up in the neighborhood. Carlin Younger, Capitol Hill resident.
While things were closed off, there wasn't a significant Capitol Police presence that would have indicated there was going to be big problems, big trouble brewing. It seemed like we were ready, and I felt pretty secure. Senator Tammy Duckworth, an Illinois Democrat.
The National Guard will be present to protect the pro-Trump people, and many more will be available on standby. Mark Meadows, White House Chief of Staff.
I usually don't take my gun to work. I can, but I usually don't because we have so many police. But I did take it that day. Representative Adam Kinzinger, Illinois Republican.
I will be speaking at the Save America rally tomorrow on the Ellipse at 11 a.m. Eastern. Arrive early. Doors open at 7 a.m. Eastern. Big crowds. Donald Trump tweet, January 5th.
We were preparing to be there for a really, really long day because we knew that there would be objections. We initially thought there would be 6. Then we heard it might only be 3 or 4. So instead of becoming a 24-hour day, it becomes more like a 16 or 18-hour day. So we were sort of focused on the task at hand. We weren't really thinking too much about what was happening outside. Joe Novotny, House Reading Clerk.
All we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1, he let the legislatures of the state look into this so we can get to the bottom of it and let the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not. We no longer live in a self-governing republic if we can't get the answer to this question. This is bigger than President Trump. It is the very essence of our Republican form of government, and it has to be done. And anybody that is not willing to stand up to do it does not deserve to be in the office. It is that simple. John Eastman, lawyer for Donald Trump.
That had gathered. We've been told to stay away from the windows earlier on. And, you know, we started to hear about it and started to get text messages and see reports that there have been bombs discovered, that Cannon Building was evacuated. Congressman Peter Major, Republican of Ohio.
All this bullshit about not bringing guns to DC needs to stop. This is America. Fuck DC. It's in the Constitution. Bring your goddamn guns. Rioter.
Most of the day was just people walking by, you know, saying, hello, we support you, and we're not like Antifa. See how we're not burning down the city? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, if you really supported us, you'd just go home. Metropolitan Police Officer.
Our impression was that it was all a done deal, that he'd spoken to the president about it in the Oval, in a meeting about pardons, and that our names came up. They were working on submitting the paperwork and getting members of the House Freedom Caucus to sign on as a show of support. I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically. I remember talking to probably close to a dozen other members at one point or another, or their staffs. We received several assurances about the blanket pardon from Congressman Paul Gosar, rally organizer.
I was at one point surrounded by a group of Proud Boys that were very hostile. One of them poked me in the chest and he said, "Why are you taking pictures?" I never actually lie. I just said, "No, man, no, it's all right." I'm very visibly Chinese American. And at some of these rallies, and especially on January 6th, you do think about that a little bit. You think about whether or not you're going to blend into that crowd or if you're going to be targeted because of your race or your gender. So I thought about that. But I was wearing a balaclava, and a cloth mask because I was concerned about COVID. And I was wearing glasses. I was wearing a bicycle helmet that covered my head. Alan Chin, freelance photojournalist.
It is perfectly appropriate, given the questionable constitutionality of the Election Counting Act of 1887, that the vice president could cast it aside and he can do what a president called Jefferson did when he was vice president. He can decide on the validity of these crooked ballots, or he can send it back to the legislators, give them 5 to 10 days to finally finish their work. We now have letters from 5 legislators begging us to do that. They're asking us Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, and one other coming in. Over the next 10 days, we get to see the machines that are crooked, the ballots that are fraudulent, and if we're wrong, we will be made fools of. But if we're right, a lot of them will go to jail. Let's have trial by combat. Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York, speaking at the January 6th rally.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done, and that's what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that is what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. Today, I will lay out just some of the evidence proving that we won this election, and we won it by a landslide. This was not a close election. Donald Trump's speech at the January 6th rally.
Who would you like to see dispatched first? Number 1, Nancy Pelosi. Number 2, John Roberts. 3, Pence. 4, other. You name it. I was leaning toward Nancy, but it might have to be Pence. Rioter.
We started making our way to the Capitol. We started to notice dense crowds in front of the place. And as we moved up, we went from like 2 columns of officers. We squeezed into one because people were pressing in on us on all sides. It just started getting more dense. A lot of people started screaming, traitors, and people were saying, we're here for you, we're here to support you, but you're not supporting us. Metropolitan Police Officer.
Today is not the end. It's just the beginning. With your help, over the last 4 years, we built the greatest political movement in the history of our country, and nobody even challenges that. I say it over and over, and I never get challenged by the fakeness. And they challenge almost everything we say. But our fight is against the big donors, big media, big tech, and others is just getting started. This is the greatest in history. There's never been a movement like it. You look back there, all the way to the Washington Monument. It's hard to believe. We must stop the steal, and then we must ensure that such outrageous election fraud never happens again, can never be allowed to happen again. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to walk to the Capitol. So let's all walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to thank you all God bless you, and God bless America. Donald Trump's speech on January 6th.
No wonder the president said January 6th in DC was going to be wild. Lynn Wood just told us many of our politicians are raping and killing children. They won't be able to walk down the street. He tweeted that Pence should be executed by firing squad. Trump supporter.
When the speech ended, people just started marching towards the Capitol. We thought nothing of it. We didn't have the big picture. We were thinking, this is our little space. We took care of it. Nothing happened. And then the guy in charge comes over the radio saying, hey, I need some units now. The Capitol's about to get overrun. Capitol Police are getting overrun. Metropolitan Police Officer.
As I'm walking back into the Rayburn building, I see one of the people working the doors, and she's just listening wide-eyed to her radio. And I'm like, is this happening? And she's like, yeah, they're hitting us with bear spray. So I'm like, hitting you with bear spray? Representative Adam Kinzinger, Illinois Republican.
When that started happening, you start hearing a lot more of a hushed, but sort of urgent kind of whispers. That kind of starts happening among staff members, among members, and that sort of became apparent. The energy of that room just felt very different than it normally does. Representative Ruben Gallego, Democrat from New Mexico.
People are yelling and screaming at us, shoving us, trying to grab those bicycle rack-looking things that have been used for barriers. People were starting to get pepper sprayed. It was starting to slowly ratchet up towards real-life violence. Metropolitan Police Officer.
I remember I was listening to Senator Langford go on and on about all this bullshit election integrity, you know, I mean, this is why we need an investigation. It wasn't really sinking in about what was going to happen. Then some person on the intercom came on and they were like, please stay away from the windows and doors, telling us to kind of shelter in place. And that was another indication that, oh, this is going down the deep end. That was the first time I ever heard that. I didn't even know that was a thing. Igor Bobik, reporter.
I leaned over to Steve Daines and said, what do you think the chances are that I'm not going to get to finish this speech? Because he sits right next to me. And he said, probably pretty good at this point. And so I stood up. I was called next to speak. Senator James Langford, Oklahoma Republican.
The vice president was presiding, and an actuator went off in the cloakroom, that bee-oo, bee-oo, bee-oo sound that you almost never hear. And there was some commotion. I could sort of dimly hear some sound in the hallway, so I got up and I went off to the cloakroom. I noticed all the televisions were off. And I said, is there something going on? And a staffer said, you need to get back into that chamber right now, in an unusually directive way. And I was like, is there something going on? And she's like, we have a situation. Get back into the chamber. Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware.
They started doing the lockdown procedure in the Senate gallery, locking the doors. Are you in? Are you out? I was in. And then they went to put us in the chamber if people wanted to go in the chamber. I called my editor, Jason Dick, to let him know that I was going to be offline for an undetermined amount of time because I wasn't going to bring my phone to the chamber. And he was like, no, take your phone, fuck decorum. So I brought my phone in. I was one of the only people, obviously, with a phone in there. Catherine Tully McManus, reporter.
About 2 minutes into the speech, I watched the Secret Service break in through the side door, grab the vice president, pull him out while I'm speaking. And I'm still speaking, doing my speech, kind of watching all this. And Chuck Grassley gavels down, immediately says we're in recess. And a staff member walked up to me from the cloakroom and said, there are protesters in the building. And that's how I find out, was kind of watching the whole thing begin to unfold in front of me. Capitol Police were with us. The Sergeant of Arms just said, hey, we're just going to stay right here and wait for a moment until we see. The first time we really understood what was happening, other than just their urgency to be able to move us, was when they had one of the folks from the Capitol Police, when the leadership came over to the area where we were all staged, waiting. When he walked in the door, he had a big cut above his eye and was bleeding down his face. He had another cut here on the other side of his face, on his cheek, and was bleeding from there. When he walked in, we realized, oh no, there's actual hand-to-hand combat going on. Senator James Lankford, Oklahoma Republican.
I remember having my phone out and I was running down the steps and I was trying to decide, wait, should I record? Should I not? Like, I knew I wasn't supposed to record in the hallways. There was a split second where I was like, maybe I'll just have it on for photos. I knew that there was going to be something worth recording, but I didn't know what it was going to be. Then, just luckily enough, I ended up recording it. And that was how I got the video. And I'm really glad I did, because without it, Officer Goodman's heroism might not have come to light. How he pulled that crowd back up in the other direction. Goodman starts retreating. He's saying, second floor, breach, and kind of leading people away from the nearest entrance into the Senate and onto another line of cops who are waiting behind him. It was there on the second floor when I first took a look outside the window right by the Ohio clock. That's when I realized, oh my God, there's hundreds and hundreds of people outside. This is insane. Igor Bobik, reporter.
I was down in the tunnels, headed over at maybe at like 2:20 or 2:25. I had to go down into the tunnels, getting ready to catch the subway. And the Capitol Police stopped me and said, we've just shut down the Capitol. They've breached the Capitol. At least one of the doors, they've shut down the Capitol. I had to make a decision. Do I go and still be with the other senators, or do I try to secure myself and hope that I can stay someplace secure until they can come get me? Being a wheelchair user, knowing how few entrances and exits and ways off the floor there are for me in my wheelchair, and that the stairs wouldn't be an option if they needed to move, I decided not to go forward. We returned to my office and we barricaded ourselves in. Senator Tammy Duckworth, Democrat of Illinois, Iraq war veteran, double amputee.
So they're pressed up against the door. They hadn't breached anything yet. And that's when a slow wave of panic started coming over me. I saw the looks on their faces, and I was like, we're fucked. Like, we're completely fucked right now, because there was nothing stopping them. Jay Rupert, House employee.
The Capitol Police say they need everyone to put on their gas masks because they're going to have to deploy tear gas. And that's kind of when all hell breaks loose, because no one really knows how you wear these gas masks. So we pull them out from underneath our chairs, and it's a very difficult thing. Representative Ruben Gallego, Democrat from New Mexico.
Cops were coming in to be relieved by other ones. It reminded me of a scene from a war movie in Iraq or something. They were just completely dusted with stuff on them. It looked like they were walking out of a World Trade Center rubble, and they're just all shook up. One cop was standing another one up on his arm. It was completely surreal for that to happen right outside the Senate chamber. The other thing that really haunted me was that one of the rioters walking around with a Confederate flag, strutting about left and right, like, we did it, we're here. I couldn't believe it. A fucking Confederate flag in the Capitol. That didn't even happen during the Civil War. There was a lot of camo, gas masks, people who obviously came ready for confrontation. Igor Bobik, reporter.
Things have gotten crazy and I desperately need some direction. Please. Text message from rally organizer to Mark Meadows.
So where we are at, if you look at the pictures of the inauguration platform, it's basically a giant wooden stage built on top of where the stairs are, right? Well, we're in this little nook at the bottom there. And when the gas started to hit, we started to pull back. You could tell our line was cracking. So we started to pull back. Now there are two sets of steps on either side between the two big galleries. So we just started going up the steps and then closed the doors and got onto the area where they inaugurate the president. It was then I realized how big the freaking crowd was. If you've ever seen the movie The Return of the King, there's a scene where the camera sweeps over the armies at Minas Tirith, and you could see this huge crowd. That's kind of what it felt like. And I could finally see the full breadth of the crowd and how deep it was. Metropolitan Police Officer.
Even though that the crowd was pushing on the police were not using tear gas, and they were not using rubber bullets, and so they were only using their pepper spray. And the crowd was, let me be frank, equally well equipped. The crowd had a lot of sticks, there were metal pipes, there were flagpoles which were being used as sticks. It was an extraordinary scene of the police and the crowd pushing against each other. You could even see members of a crowd turning their backs to the police in a row so they could push backwards in order to overturn the barricades. And this was all on that front, the West Front. I've not seen anything like that in the United States. Alan Chin, photojournalist.
I was like, where's the National Guard? And it was just so amazing to watch for a couple of hours as nobody responded to help those Capitol Police officers who were clearly in trouble. Representative Don Bayer, Virginia Democrat.
As we're getting out the door, I turned to the left and I could see on the glass that ultimately got broken, all these people pounding, angry faces, full. And it's right after I left is when they broke the glass. That woman tried to climb through and she was shot. Representative Gary Connolly, Virginia Democrat.
You guys have to say something. Even if the president's not willing to put out a statement, you should go to the cameras and say, we condemn this. Please stand down. If you don't, people are going to die. Former White House official Alyssa Farah, text to White House.
I was really mad that we'd given up control of the Senate. Very upset that this could happen. But my initial reaction was just pissed. Like, what are we doing? You can't let people take over the Capitol. And I was just amazed that that could happen. Senator Lindsey Graham, South Carolina Republican.
I was here on 9/11, and that was probably the most scared I've ever been in my 25 years here. But this one is a notch up the scale. It's a little bit worse than 9/11 for me. It was a little more personal in a sense. Senate maintenance worker.
I walked into the room And this was at the height of COVID, a huge room full of people, some who had masks on, some not. I said, I'm not staying here. And the police officer said, well, Senator, you must. And I said, the hell I am. And I left and went to my own office. Senator Angus King, a Maine independent.
We just sat there and visited for 4 or 5 hours. Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama.
The order was given for us to pull back inside the building, and I was one of maybe the last 10 to go back inside. So we went into the tunnel, we closed the gate, and then the glass doors behind us. Next thing you know, we start hearing pounding. And I'm like, no, this is the Capitol building. They've got like bulletproof glass or shatterproof glass or something like that. Then I start hearing cracking sounds. And then one of the lieutenants was yelling, trying to give us a pep talk. He was like, we're not going to lose the US Capitol today. But no one can hear him above the craziness. I hear the glass shatter and I see somebody step up, and then more people start coming in. And we're sitting there with our shields next to each other, 4 guys on the front line with our shields, trying to hold these people back. And I yell something like, get the fuck out of here, Metropolitan Police Officer.
Nobody was doing anything illegal that I saw. Now, that's where I was at. I can't speak to a space other than the space where I was at. Mark Fincham, Arizona State Representative, Oath Keeper, rioter.
I know we had an officer who was struggling in a lot of pain. And I yelled over to the people behind me to the right of me, and I said, hey, we need to make a hole for this guy to get out of here. So they started yelling and they coordinated. It was so densely packed, you couldn't move your arms around. We were squeezed up tight against each other. I know I keep making movie references, but remember Jon Snow in the Battle of the Bastards when he was getting squeezed on all sides? You could not breathe. At some point, I heard some of the protesters yelling, hey, I can't breathe. And all I'm thinking is, and why the fuck are you here? Metropolitan Police Officer.
Mark, the president needs to tell the people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy. Laura Ingram, conservative television host. Text to Mark Meadows.
At that point, your mind goes to like, how organized are they? Do they have a plan? Are they taking hostages? And of course, my office door says periodical press gallery, press only. So clearly these people who are storming the building, not fans of my office. You start getting the alerts on your phone from the House saying shelter in place. And House Periodical Press Gallery Director Rob Zetkowski and I sat out in the hallway, trying to get as many people into our office, locked into our office as possible. We stayed out in the hallway until we saw a protester turn the corner to get in our hallway. That's when I said, okay, we've got to lock it down. Jay Rupert, House employee.
All I could think of was what happened on 9/11 and the regrets of families not being able to say goodbye. So I made it a point to say goodbye to my family. I didn't do it dramatically. I said, I think it's going to be fine. But in case it isn't, I love you and I will miss you. And I'm here for all the right reasons, I hope. Representative Jerry Connolly, Virginia Democrat.
When McCarthy finally reached the president on January 6th and asked him to publicly call off the riot, The president initially repeated the falsehood that it was Antifa that had breached the Capitol. At one point during the phone call, McCarthy told Trump, "Who the fuck do you think you're talking to?" Statement of Representative Jamie Herrera Butler, Republican of Washington, who was briefed on the conversation.
Every few minutes, a big bang on our door. We're coming to get you. You're next. After we get Pelosi, we're going to get you. Fuck the media. Come out and play. What really freaked me out, and I recall this specifically, is somebody, probably about 2 hours into it, give or take, somebody is walking outside our office, and their quote was, "We have the building." That sent a wave of terror through me. And then you compound that with, my wife texting me. My 3 kids know this building is Daddy's office. It's not Congress. And she had to send them to a friend's house so they couldn't see what was happening. And she had to send them to a friend's house so they couldn't see what was happening. J. Rupert, House employee.
I see this stream of white liquid, almost like super soaker, come out of the dark and hit me right in the face. I knew I was done at that point because it was just pain. It was bear spray. This was burning hellfire. It's like having a first-degree burn on your face and then sticking your head in an oven. I can't see for almost 30 minutes after that. I couldn't see a damn thing. I just kept my eyes closed, and every now and then I would blink my eyes open and try to wipe that shit off my face. Metropolitan Police Officer.
Please get him on TV, destroying everything you have accomplished. Brian Kilmeade, Fox and Friends, host. Text to White House.
Honestly, I've never been so happy to be tear gassed in my life. I knew that this would work because I know what tear gas can do when you use so much of it at once against a crowd that is mostly not wearing gas masks. And it did work. And they were able to clear that area very quickly once they did it, which of course made me think, why didn't they do this 3 hours ago? Alan Chin, photojournalist.
I know your pain. I know your hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of those people. We have to go in peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You've seen the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel, but go home and go in peace. Donald Trump, video address, 3 hours after Capitol breached.
I went up to the Senate, the actual Senate wing, and I was taking pictures. I took some pictures of the offices and I could see all the damage on the inside of the building. There's just trash everywhere. And intermixed between it was baseball bats and billy clubs. I started walking around the seating where the president gets inaugurated, and there were just backpacks full of first aid kits, just a bunch of Amazon tactical gear. These guys had gotten all their gear off Amazon. I saw some janitors walking around already cleaning up. I saw some Capitol Hill maintenance workers already doing measurements for the broken doors and the glass, like they were kicked into overdrive. Metropolitan Police Officer.
Okay, John, you need to unmute and repeat that.
I've been here for 25 years. We've cleaned up after many things, but this is a little bit more to clean up after something like that. Because of where it came from, it pisses you off a little bit more. These people were talking about killing us, federal employees, killing police. We're all black in our labor shops. It felt bad. It's degrading. House maintenance worker.
The thing that was very powerful for us was when the speaker and Steny Hoyer walked into the room. And at that point, we knew that there was some sense of control because we hadn't seen them. And they told us, we're going back. We have a job to do. We have to show the world that we are not going to allow our constitutional requirements to be disrupted. So we have to do what we were put here to do. Joe Novotny, House Reading Clerk.
Whether we had to step over bodies and glass, it didn't matter. We had to do it here. We had to do it today. And I was determined I ain't leaving until that vote is final. And I didn't. Representative Jerry Connolly, Democrat of Virginia.
We continued where we left off, but the tenor had changed because my talk to Paul Gosar was, hey, do you see the consequences of what you're doing by not wanting to accept this election as real, as legal, as legitimate? The debate changed because now we saw the consequences of what was happening outside. Representative Raul Grijalva, Democrat of Arizona.
The weirdest thing about the whole thing is that they had these Republican senators that voted to object even after this insurrection. And it didn't seem like at the time that lawmakers themselves had actually seen what was going on. I mean, they might have seen some tweets, some stuff online, but they didn't know the full extent of the carnage, like on the West Front and the stuff going on inside. And I wonder what would have happened if the vote had been delayed a couple days and people had seen how bad it was, as if they were still going to have voted to object. Igor Bobik, reporter.
I was furious. I'd seen Matt Gaetz give a speech saying that it was Antifa. And I'm like, man, here we go. You can't whitewash this, even though they're sure done a good job of trying. So I walked down to the floor. I remember I gave a 1 or 2 minute speech where I finished it basically saying, the emperor has no clothes. And I remember the dead silence on the Republican side of the aisle after I said that. Representative Adam Kinzinger, Republican of Illinois.
Quite honestly, I didn't see the full extent of, the repugnant racial slurs and that kind of thing until the impeachment trial. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin.
I remember all of a sudden there was this very abrupt switch where we went from these raw, very personal and improvised speeches to just people pulling out from their breast pocket of their suit and start reading the same speeches about the Electoral College count that they were going to give as if the riot hadn't happened. Representative Andy Kim, Democrat of New Jersey.
From our point of view, now this is personal, not political anymore. You're voting with the mob. You're voting with the people who wanted to kill us and hurt police and killed one of them, and were running around saying hang Pence and poison or shoot Pelosi and bringing these plastic handcuffs. I mean, oh my God, what are they up to? You're thinking they're here for peaceful purposes? And you voted with them? Really? We upheld our promise to the American people, but I also felt just incredibly demoralized. Representative Jerry Connolly, Democrat of Virginia.
The hardest thing was leaving the Capitol that day. Because when you've been a Hill staffer pretty much your whole life, the dome is an incredibly sacred thing. It's beautiful. It represents so much. And you're told to never let the dome become common in your sight. And when I left, I couldn't look at the dome because I felt like I would have looked at it differently. And I did not want that feeling. I did not want to look at it in a way that no longer felt beautiful or no longer represented the same thing. And that was really, really hard. Joe Novotny, House Reading Clerk.
Fuck yes, I'm proud of my actions. I fucking charged the Capitol today with patriots today. Hell yes, I'm proud of my actions. Jenny Cudd of Texas, rioter.
They could have stopped it because they knew about it. They were warned about it. They could have stopped. I hope they now know what to do. Just hoping there won't be another insurrection. A Capitol maintenance worker of nearly 3 decades.
Tear gas is over everything we own to this day. Whenever I have to put on our riot gear, I still get reactivation from the OC, the active ingredient in the pepper spray, or the CS, the main component of tear gas. You'll hear guys to this day sneezing in the locker room because they were putting on their gear and there was still residual CS powder on it. The fire department came by and they literally just hosed down all of our gear. I took it home, wiped it down, and then I threw it in a laundry machine. To this day, I'm still getting burned from stuff. Metropolitan Police Officer.
We took the building once, we can take it again. Rioter.
Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. I hate it to end this way. Oh my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see, all I can say is count me out. Lindsey Graham, Senator, Republican of South Carolina.
President Trump claims his election was stolen. The assertions range from specific local allegations to constitutional arguments to sweeping conspiracy theories. I supported the president's right to use the legal system. I believe protecting our constitutional order requires respecting limits on our own power. It would be unfair and wrong to disenfranchise American voters and overrule the courts and the states on this thin basis. And I will not pretend such a vote would be a harmless protest gesture while relying on others to do the right thing. I will vote to respect the people's decision and defend our system of government as we know it. Senator Mitch McConnell, Majority Leader, voting to certify election results.
The attack on the US Capitol on January 6th was not an insurrection, but a largely peaceful protest. Even calling it an insurrection, it wasn't. You know, I condemned the breach. I condemned the violence. But to say that there were thousands of armed insurrectionists breaching the Capitol intent on overthrowing the government is just simply false narrative. I've spoken to some of my constituents in Wisconsin that were present at a Stop the Steal rally on the National Mall and the US Capitol that day. By and large, it was peaceful protest. Except for there were a number of people, basically agitators, that whipped the crowd and breached to the Capitol. That's really the truth of what's happening here. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin.
This was an intensifying crescendo of conspiracy theories orchestrated by an outgoing president who seemed determined to either overturn the voters' decision or else torch our institutions on the way out. There is no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of this day. A mob was assaulting the Capitol in his name. These criminals were carrying his banner, hanging his flags, and screaming their loyalty to him. This was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the biggest megaphone on planet Earth. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth because he was angry he lost an election. Senator Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader.
The violent assault on the Capitol and disruption of a constitutionally mandated meeting of Congress was undertaken by people whose passions have been inflamed by falsehoods and false hopes. Insurrection could do grave damage to our nation and reputation. In the United States of America, it is a fundamental responsibility of every patriotic citizen to support the rule of law. To those who are disappointed in the results of our election, our country is more important than the politics of the moment. Let the officials elected by the people fulfill their duties and represent our voices in peace and safety. May God continue to bless the United States of America. Former President George W. Bush.
21 House Republicans voted this week against awarding congressional medals to Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police to thank them for their service on January 6th, which numerous lawmakers have credited with saving their lives as a pro-Donald Trump mob stormed the Capitol with the aim of disrupting the congressional certification of Trump's loss to Joe Biden in the November 3rd presidential elections. Associated Press.
They were peaceful patriots. Ashley Babbitt was executed by Capitol Police that day. Outright propaganda and lies are being used to unleash the national security state against law-abiding US citizens, especially Trump voters. Representative Paul Gosar, Republican of Arizona.
The rioters were a US version of the paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party that supported Hitler. It was a planned revolution, Steve Bannon's version coming to life. Bring it all down, blow it up, burn it, and emerge with power. General Mark Milley, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff.
There's no evidence that white supremacists were responsible for what happened on January 6th. There's no evidence that white supremacists were responsible for what happened on January 6th. That's a lie. And contrary to what you've been hearing, There's also no evidence that this was a, quote, arms insurrection. Tucker Carlson, Fox Television News host.
Today, we face a threat that America has never seen before. A former president who provoked a violent attack on this Capitol in an effort to steal the election has resumed his aggressive effort to convince Americans that the election was stolen from him. He risks inciting further violence. Millions of Americans have been misled by the former president. They have heard only his words, but not the truth. He continues to undermine our democratic process, sowing seeds of doubt about whether democracy really works at all. I am a conservative Republican, and the most conservative of conservative principles is reverence for the rule of law. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, this is at the heart of what our oath requires: that we love our country more, that we love her so much that we will stand above politics to defend her, that we will do everything in our power to protect the Constitution and our freedom that has been paid for by the blood of so many. We must love America so much that we will never yield in her defense. That is our duty. Thank you. Representative Liz Cheney, Republican of Wyoming.
War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. George Orwell.